Piranhas, ruthless pack killing machines, right? But notice, even in the feeding frenzy, they don't kill each other. Piranhas do not believe in a god, yet they don't do whatever they want. Where do these ruthless killing machines get their moral code about not killing each other from? Well, let's listen to a creationist try to explain this, shall we? This is Rabbi Zacharias, who deems himself mighty among Christian apologetics. Firstly, the preacher attempts to gain authority from recalling some anecdotal story of how he converted some skeptical heckler at some top university event. The psychology is simple. I bested an aggressively skeptical intellectual with this argument, so this is a good reason for you to accept it. This is a common ruse among preachers who gleefully bask with smug satisfaction as they recall their stories about how they wittily and roundly demolished these hapless straw-stuffed opponents. In the current context, the migration of the location of the events points to a completely fictitious account engineered to manipulate the audience.
I remember years ago at the University of Nottingham, as I said to the student at Harvard, the student stood up and said to me, there's no such being as God because of all the evil that is around in the world. I said, can we talk on that for a few moments? He said, yes. I said, remain standing. I'll talk to you. I said, when you say just such a thing as good, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as evil? That is correct, he said. Aren't you assuming there's such a thing as good? He said, yes. I said, when you say there's such a thing as evil, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as a moral law on the basis of which to differentiate between good and evil? I said, when you say there's such a thing as good, you must assume a moral law. He said, all right, I'll grant you that. I said, but when you say there's such a thing as a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver. But that's whom you're trying to disprove and not prove. If there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. What is your question? And I said, but if you posit such a thing as a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver, but that's whom you're trying to disprove, sir, and not prove. If there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. What is your question?
And pause for the easily impressed audience. So that's how Zach sells his snake oil. List a series of points which everyone agrees with, put in your bogus claim about God done it, then quickly recite off all the points of agreement to get the applause from the flock. Can anyone say intentionally deceptive? So let's see what else we can prove with Zach's argument. I was talking with an atheist who did not believe that God jacked it, so I said to him, if you assume there is such a thing as dark, are you not assuming that there is such a thing as night? He said, yes. By assuming there is such a thing as night, are you not assuming that there is such a thing as day? He thought about it and eventually said, yes. By assuming there is such a thing as day, are you not assuming there is such a thing as sunrise? He agreed. So I said to him, if you accept that there is such a thing as sunrise, then you must accept that there is a supernatural, all-powerful being lifting the sun into the air on a giant jack. If God is not jacking it, there is no sunrise. If there is no sunrise, there is no light. If there is no light, there is no dark. Oh, what is your question? Yep, that's right. Proposing a supernatural explanation for sunrise is just as credible as proposing one for morality. So what is the naturalistic explanation for the origin of morals? How do piranhas know not to kill each other without a supernatural commandment forbidding it? Morals specifically relate to the behavior of individuals within societies. You don't have to think about the required properties of a stable society long to realize that it's impossible to have a society without certain morals. The most obvious example is, of course, if you go and kill other members of the society will not propagate effectively and there will not be a stable society. This is largely true whether it be wolves, apes, big cats, killer whales, piranhas or people. Trust is largely the same. For instance, wolves will pool caring for their cubs, but don't eat each other just because no one else is looking. So where is the moral lawgiver here, Zach? So basically, if you have a stable society, you have what may be described as some morals. The property is intrinsic, just like four corners is a property of a square. Good is usually used to describe behaviors that benefit society, and evil those that are detrimental to it. Usually evil involves putting personal gain over that of the society. So where do morals originate from? Well, depending on the environment, there can be a selective pressure that favors the survival of animals that cooperate. In such cases, only the animals that cooperate will survive. Cooperation is observed in many species, and in certain environments yields a significant advantage. So, evolution provides an acceptable naturalistic explanation for morality. So do we have any control over our morality? Is our morality mostly in our DNA or in our brains? Well, both. There is something that might be described as the biological leash. Some things you have lots of choice over, others virtually none. For instance, you have practically no control over the facial expressions used to convey emotion. They are hardwired, a point that is evident from the fact that even blind children, who have never seen a smile, smile when they are happy. All humans, all over the world, irrespective of what language they use the same facial expressions to convey emotion. So let's take another example of something that's fairly well biologically hardwired. For instance, the desire to protect babies is sufficiently strong that we feel the desire to protect almost anything with big eyes and a relatively large head-to-body ratio. This is generally true of all maternal mammals. Killing is an ambiguous one for the nastiest monkey on the mountain. In killing for food, humans are more akin to piranhas and have little to no problem in killing other animals for food. For our hunter-gatherer forefathers, eking out an existence on the edge of survival, killing one of your own clan would be really bad in that all societies require strong social bonding, as your own survival may depend on the individuals around you. We have a strong instinct not to kill people we know. However, in modern civilization we are largely divorced from the style of society we are biologically tuned to live in. It is therefore found that with sufficient conditioning that people will kill others with relatively little concern. Yet in almost all societies, those who submit themselves to such conditioning, training to kill other humans, are seen as of high moral character. Is this good or evil? Does it benefit mankind or not? Is this moral or immoral? What would you do? These are simple questions that cannot be answered simply. Now there will be those who claim that morals are not relative and so on. These are people who have lived sheltered and pampered lives. Moral absolutes are a luxury that can only be afforded by a rich and prosperous society built on something like scientific naturalism. I mean, let's take the usual cause for conflict, resources. Let's put our two families with their absolute morals on an island with only enough food or medical supplies or whatever to sustain one of them. Yeah, absolute morality evaporates quick enough when such individuals are removed from the opulent luxury of a modern society. Indeed, you don't even need a hypothetical situation to highlight the relativism of morals. Take the very real example of total war. Would you carpet bomb cities containing thousands of children to attain victory? Would you nuke an enemy's cities to attain victory? Would you research a weapon in peacetime that could kill hundreds of thousands? This is not a new dilemma. The Romans, who were smart folk, had a saying for this. Inter arma enim silent leges. In times of war, the law goes silent. So, historically it is observed that the morality of mankind is fairly plastic, with people no different from you or I being okay with respect to slavery, children as collateral damage, and even genocide being morally acceptable. So now that you have some background into why we have the morals we do and how flexible they can be, you'll be probably asking the question, how can I work out if my actions are more or less moral than anyone else's? Well, for the individual, interacting locally, the golden rule of treat others as you would be treated is a simplistic start, although obviously the strategy is completely inept on the macroscopic level, as it's simply a recipe for being conquered. Arguably a more thoughtful argument is to assess your actions, and if you think they will increase the standard of living and the happiness of society.